Good morning. Happy that you're all here, and the Friendship Village Foundation welcomes all of you to our semi-annual seminar. You may know that we, as a foundation, schedule 2 seminars a year, and we are very much looking forward to this one. You may also know that the foundation was formed in 1986 and has been doing good works for the village throughout that many years. We are committed as a foundation to doing things that enhance the lives of residents, both in terms of housing, healthcare, financial stability, and intellectual, cultural, recreational, and spiritual enrichment. Plus, we're always happy to announce that we are committed to helping with employee education, and we have employee scholarships that this year are going to total over $50,000 in scholarships. So we're happy about that. You may also know that recently the village shop out here in the cafe area has become a part of the foundation, and their proceeds in recent years have been restricted to the purchase of new hospital beds for the healthcare center. And to date, as of the end of last year, we've purchased 64 beds at a price of about $3,000 or $4,000, I think, per bed. Is that right? $5,000, I'm getting a tip here, $5,000 per bed. So we'll keep that going until the beds are all replaced and hopefully more comfortable if any of us find ourselves there. Lastly, in your mailboxes in the last couple of days, there was a slip that gives residents an opportunity to make suggestions of how you would like to see foundation funds spent to enrich residents' lives or education for all of our goals, so all of the things that I've just mentioned. I've received about 7 since they went in the other day. We will continue to work on those. These are suggestions that pretty much would be implemented through the next year. But if you have suggestions, please make them and put them in my mailbox or give them to the front desk. If you have suggestions at other times in the year, that form is always available online at Resident Apps, as well as all of the foundation board members are listed on Resident Apps under the organization logo, and any of us would be happy to answer your questions at any time. Now, I'd like to take just a sentence to say a great big thank you to Tom Poole and the development committee who have put this seminar together, and I'd like to introduce Tom.
Thank you. We have a wonderful opportunity to hear today from one of the nation's best speakers who speaks all over the country, who came here yesterday from Chicago, just to speak to us. And Tony Galvan, Director of Health and Wellness for Life Care Services. We're going to welcome him to the stage, and thank you very much for coming.
And Tom, you could go down that way if it's easier for you. This one's a little rough there. Yeah. That was a very generous introduction on Tom's behalf. I wrote it myself. So that's how you can make sure that you get a really good introduction there. So thank you to Tom and Arlene and the other Friendship Village Tempe Foundation members and board members for allowing me to do this. It's interesting, Tom talks about, being from Chicago. As I've been walking around this morning, introducing myself to you all and just saying good morning, the question is all about the weather, right? How's the weather right now in Chicago? So just to fill everybody in, we're doing about low 50s in Chicago right now. And for those of you that are familiar, Chicago doesn't really transition, right? It's a switch. You just go from one extreme to the other. And so having landed yesterday, as Tom mentioned, it was still upper 80s. I had a pretty big delay in Chicago. Came in, thankfully saved a couple of hours, right, from Chicago coming to this time zone, and so it was still early enough, and still about upper 80s in the evening yesterday. I'm in shorts and a polo. Just went out, grabbed some dinner, and folks are walking around in their hoodies and sweatshirts. And so I, I couldn't help to shake my head and to just a bit of envy that in upper 80s you all feel that it's a bit frigid. So I'm surprised as I look around the room that I don't see parkas or coats or requests to really crank the temperature up, because I think at this point you all probably have acclimated to to the weather here, certainly. So I genuinely am excited to be here today. This is maybe my 5th time coming to your community, actually. Cole and the team have been very gracious over the years as they've hosted several meetings for our Life Care Services team, and mainly our Health Services Division, which I'm a part of as the Director of Health and Wellness. And this is probably the latest in the year that I've been here. Typically, it's in our infinite wisdom. Typically, we're here in August. So we're experiencing triple digits, and it is a bit rough, but I've had the pleasure of being in your community, in your home, again, at least a handful of times over the last several years. You have an amazing community, and aside from the just aesthetics and the physical spaces that I know you all are proud of, what I always enjoy the most is getting to meet each and every one of you. So I tried my best to sort of walk around. Some of you might have seen me out there during breakfast in the cafe and in the bistro, and just grabbing a seat and sitting down and talking to you all as residents. And the reason I care so much about that is really that's where I started with senior living. So the community that I used to work at is called Monarch Landing, very similar to yours, gorgeous life plan community outside of the Chicagoland suburbs. And that was one of my first introductions to senior living. And we were talking in the table here earlier, folks kind of stumble into senior living as a career. It's not something that you necessarily plan for. You don't always know what it has to offer. But by and large, one of my favorite things has always been engaging directly with the residents and with the seniors. And I did that for about 10 or 11 years in my time at Monarch Landing. So when I say thank you for the opportunity, Tom and Arlene, I mean that, because I don't get to speak to you all or talk to seniors or residents even as much as I used to, because I used to do that every single day. And especially with what we're here to talk about today, which again is health and wellness. And so that sort of being my background, I do miss, again, getting in front of groups like you all and having conversations about this, because I truly enjoy it. I have fun with it, so I want to thank you all for the opportunity as well. So when Tom approached me a few months ago and asked me to swing on by and talk to you all a little bit, one of the first things that he mentioned was kind of the title of this. And first and foremost, I think it's so awesome that your foundation, aside from all of the great things it does already, and hearing Arlene kind of run through some of the more recent accomplishments, even having these semi-annual opportunities, I think is just great, just to provide you with some education. So when he approached me about this topic in particular, and he used that term, living your best life. We want you, Tony, to come down and talk to people about living their best life, living your best life. And that really piqued my interest, Tom. I thought that was interesting and that was fun. And you sort of hear that term, or that phrase rather. It's been a little trendy the last couple of years, actually. You hear people mention this. It's quite the pop culture reference, actually, what it means to live your best life. So I'm curious, as you all heard about this seminar, and you started seeing it being announced and promoted in newsletters and in flyers and all of the different ways that you all communicate events and whatnot, I'm curious where your mind went, what you thought about when you saw that and you understood what the topic was going to be. So today, we're going to make this pretty interactive. So it's not just going to be the Tony Show and me up here talking to you all. I want to hear from you, because I think in terms of inspiring and really educating people on what it can mean to live your best life, I think we'd be remiss if you all didn't hear from each other. Because in your own individual ways, each one of you is living your best life. And again, you're so fortunate to be here at Friendship Village Tempe as a way to do so. So that's where I want to begin. So if you look at the screen, there's that question, right? What does living your best life mean to you? So take a second and sort of think about that. And if you wouldn't mind sharing, it's going to be very interactive. Has anybody ever heard about being voluntold, right? Yeah, so that's that's going to be the tone for today. So the good news is all of you have name tags, so I can call you by name. I can pick on you individually to have you, be a part of this and really interact and engage. So so let's hear from you all. Let's get a couple of responses here. What does it mean for you to live your best life? What does living your best life mean to you? Okay, Rich.
Well, to me, it means having a purpose and a reason every day to get up in the morning and to have something productive to do and look forward to. Personally, I think all of us should be issued a banjo. It, it does make life happier.
I have a feeling we're going to have some budgets for 2020 that involve banjos, so I'll be sure to bring that up to Cole. How do you think being well, the idea of wellness, how do you think that plays a part in what it means to live your best life? Go ahead.
It plays a big part.
How so? Why?
Well, you want to be able to do things and like people, and I just like it.
Great. So it's important and plays a big part. Let's hear from Rosemary here.
My granddad used to say, when you have your health, you have everything. And I truly believe that.
So we all agree, right? Being well, having a good sense of health and wellness plays a very significant part in what it means to live your best life. And by the way, usually I'm a podium guy, but I have a 4-hour flight back to Chicago, so I'm gonna get my steps in. So this is by design, that I'm walking around and having you guys do a little bit of the talking as well. So so that's by design. So again, we agree that wellness is a significant contributor to what it means to live your best life. And when we think about why wellness is so important and how you want to start thinking about or how the concept of well-being should be reinforced, it's no mistake that what you're talking about is being important. And it's so interesting, even just with the 3 responses that we have. You talk about having purpose and remaining relevant. You talk about, just having fun and liking it and having a good time. All of that does play a part into how you want to consider the model and framework of wellness. And it's not just the fact that that's what you know to be true, and that's just what you feel and know to be factual, but it's actually been proven. Very specifically, we know at LCS and even just the greater senior living industry as a whole that folks like you all, seniors, that engage in these life enrichment opportunities that touch some of these different areas of health and wellness are the ones that are shown to age the most successfully. And that's sort of an interesting term, right? Aging successfully, like what does that mean, right? And it might mean something different for each of you. I would equate aging successfully to living your best life. I like living your best life a little bit better, actually, as a term. So knowing that you have a pathway, you have a roadmap to how you could live your best life, you'd be a bit remiss, wouldn't you, if you didn't take advantage of that and truly experience what you can as a way to be able to do that. So the good news is that you have that framework because, again, you might know the types of things that make you happy, the types of things that are available, but it's so important to be able to strike a balance with all of these areas of health and wellness that we just know to be important. So at Life Care Services, we've been talking about a holistic, multidimensional approach to health and wellness for some time now. It's been at least a decade that we've been promoting it this way and really encouraging communities such as yours to adopt this approach, adopt this model and framework, and then translate it to what your residents are doing. And let me tell you, I can't think, and I'm not just saying this because I'm here, I'll keep it real with people. Friendship Village Tempe, by far, is what I consider to be a model community in terms of how you adopt that framework and then translate it to what you all have available here every single day. So does that little image on the bottom right there and kind of on the top center, is that familiar to you all? Raise your hand if you've seen that, if that's something that you're familiar with. You've seen it on flyers, newsletters, brochures, calendars, on and off throughout the years. So when we first rolled out kind of that lifestyle program, that holistic approach, again, Cole and the team, Mary, Connie, and I've worked closely with them over the years, Emily, Jadine, they were so quick to adopt this because they knew it was the right thing to do, because that's the promise that they're making to you, isn't it? Right? And that's probably one of the primary reasons that you chose to be a resident here, right? It was because of the lifestyle. You knew that you were better off here than if you were to go somewhere else, or even if you were to stay home, right? Because you know the lifestyle was going to be enhanced in such a way. So they've done an incredibly fabulous job of making that visually apparent and then actually delivering it with what you see day in and day out. So, and again, this is a snapshot here of your activities and programs guide, where again, they're connecting the dots with what that wellness benefit is so that you can live your best life. That's how it all comes together. And even though many of you raised your hand, which is tremendous, and you sort of have that awareness, you have that familiarity, it doesn't hurt to hear it a couple of times, right? Just to remind you what it's about, what the benefits are, and how they're important. So that's really how we're going to spend the rest of our time today. It's kind of going through these different areas. Again, I'm going to get my steps in. I'm going to walk around. My goal will be 2,000 steps by 11 o'clock here. And I'm going to want to hear from you all. Well, what are some of the things that you're up to and doing to impact some of these areas of health and wellness, and how are you effectively living your best life? A couple of other snapshots here. This is your October calendar. This is just half of your October calendar. I couldn't fit the whole thing on the screen. It's crazy. There's just so much going on. And this is just for one level of care. That's the first half of the month, and there's kind of the second half of the month there. So again, it's one thing to, adopt a framework or sort of talk the talk, but you guys are walking the walk here. Again, the Marys and Connies of the world, they're putting these opportunities out there for you so that you can live your best life. And when I look at the snapshot of that calendar, again, it's just inspiring, and it's great, again, that you have the ability to live your best life right at your fingertips. Probably one of the things that I like the most about how you all take the framework that we've provided and make it real is what you've done with your own kind of wellness wheel. And if you haven't noticed, and I'm sure many of you have because you're involved, you basically gave each of the areas of wellness a verb, which I love. You associated it with an action. And that's one of the smartest things that I think can happen. And the reason for that is because it really simplifies it, right? It makes it sort of a no-brainer. We don't want to overthink this. So as we start working through some of these areas of wellness, again, you see how we got some lengthy bullet points up there, define physical health, right? If we start with physical. But again, to your intelligent translation of that, you simply say move, right? If you can just move, be active, right? We were talking about that earlier, even with some of the examples of what it meant to live your best life. You're going to be successful and effective with that specific dimension or area of wellness, right? So with physical well-being, again, that's one of the more tangible ones, right? You could really pinpoint what it means to engage in opportunities that touch physical wellness. Probably the one that comes to mind is being physically fit, right? Would you all agree with that? When you think about, am I physically well? Am I physically fit? And that's where that's absolutely important, right? Having some sort of a fitness regimen, having some level of physical activity that's achievable and that addresses those different components of fitness. That's the nice thing about some of these dimensions of wellness, and you'll notice that throughout our time today. Some of them are a bit more tangible than others, and they're a bit more obvious in terms of what it means to be successful with them. So the good news about physical health is that it's very concrete. We know what that means. And so as you look at some of those sub-bullet points, keep that in mind. Are you addressing these different areas of physical fitness in particular? So your strength training, cardiovascular health, flexibility, balance, right? Raise your hand if you care about balance. Yeah, absolutely, right? That hand should be going up really high. That's, that's important. Nobody wants to fall. We want to make sure that we're as preventative as possible and maintaining strong levels of balance. So, this is your opportunity to do a little bit of a self-assessment and really think about, am I addressing these different areas? Okay, so let's get some volunteers here. Who wants to share some of what they're doing from a physical wellness perspective? It's not bragging, it's inspiring. So let's not be shy. Who wants to share? Okay, and I'll walk over to you. Again, my steps.
FITT principles means.
Sure. Okay, so she would like to know what the FIT principles are. Great question. Those stand for frequency, intensity, time, and type, right? There's going to be a quiz at the end. So if you didn't write those down, frequency, intensity, time, and type. So a good example is maybe you walk on the treadmill. Frequency, how many days per week do you do that? Maybe it's a handful, or maybe it's a few, maybe it's 3 days per week. Then we think about intensity, right? So what speed are you walking at, right? Do you use the incline maybe? That would be your intensity. Time, how long do you do it for, right? What do you guys think is a good amount of time to do some cardiovascular exercise a few days a week? Half hour, yeah, that's perfect, right? Doesn't have to be too lengthy, doesn't have to be an hour or anything like that. 30 minutes is pretty good. And then type, I actually answered that already with the treadmill. Some of you maybe, who swims? Do we have any swimmers? Yeah, we have a few swimmers here. Who likes to just walk outside for cardiovascular exercise? Great. Who uses the fitness center and some of the equipment in there? Yeah, or some combination of those things, right? How about the machines? Strength training machines, anybody use those? Yeah. Yep. So that's what your type means as far as that goes. Beatrice?
In the elevator, if I'm alone, I do squats.
Elevator squats. And if you time them correctly, you might float a little bit up there, right? She gets 4 in, 4 per floor. There you go. And that rhymes, so use that, 4 per floor. Go ahead, Rosemary.
We have an excellent program called Safe and Strong, 3 times a week. Unfortunately, it's early, 8:15 in the morning, but I have, it has improved my balance immeasurably, and a knee that was giving me trouble, I think, is stronger because of the exercises we have for the legs. And if anybody has not, taken advantage of that, they should.
Yeah. Great plug for the Safe program there. We have another comment over here.
I wanted to say that I see this lady out, she's 90 years old, and every single morning, like at 5 o'clock in the morning, she's out walking and walking and walking. And I think that's fabulous.
That's a great shout out there. Sir Walt.
One of the programs that has recently started is Tai Chi in the morning, 8 o'clock over at the healthcare center. And it's super for balance and posture and just general fitness, all your joints.
So great sharing and great, again, that's sort of the purpose of today, aside from just hearing me talk, is really motivating and inspiring each other. And that was very nice of you and sweet of you to do with your friend. But that's what living your best life is all about, right? If you weren't in this community setting, you wouldn't be able to celebrate each other's successes like that, right? And keep encouraging and motivating each other to keep going with that. But also you might inspire somebody to get started, right, with some of these things. So Walt, great segue. What you see there on the screen is some of what you have going on here. And again, I could probably spend an hour just talking about the physical wellness and fitness opportunities that you have here. So again, that's by design. It's so tangible, it's so concrete, and you have a wealth of opportunities that you can get involved with here. Now, I'm going to do my best also during our time today. The other area, and this could probably be its own seminar, and maybe this is something that the foundation considers down the road. It's the concept of technology, right? Technology these days can absolutely help us to live our best lives. And I'll sprinkle it in throughout our conversation, but I think technology and physical wellness absolutely intersect, don't they? And whether it's from a convenience standpoint, kind of an entertainment standpoint, but also from a performance standpoint as well. And as an example, some of the things that come to mind are wearables, just as an example, right? So your Apple Watches, your Fitbits, your fitness apps these days. Raise your hand if you have a smartphone, like an iPhone or an Android device. Almost everybody in the room, right? So again, these days, and to me, this is independent of whether you are in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s plus. These tech-based solutions really lend themselves to all cohorts and all age groups. So certainly raising your awareness of what's out there. And again, by design, a lot of these tech-based solutions are meant to be intuitive, simple, easy to use, and again, most importantly, giving you the right type of information, the right type of motivation and incentive to keep you engaged with your physical fitness and wellness program. So wearables are big. Exercise equipment continues to evolve. The idea of technology within our fitness equipment continues to enhance safety, enhance performance, and again, connectivity in a way that gives you information in terms of how you're doing. So that's important. So what's your all sense? Does anybody feel like you're leveraging technology as a way to complement or enhance your physical fitness? Is anybody using like a wearable or a Fitbit? You have a comment? Yep. Yeah, we have one right here. Raise it up nice and high. Dixie has her Fitbit there. How does it help you? How do you like it?
Well, I like the Fitbit because some days you're busy doing things and you don't attend to whether or not you have done any exercise. And you can look real quick and say, I need to get more steps in, or, well, I walked all over Walmart and I made my steps and I've got it done. But it gives you a more concrete measurement, and it talks to me. It says, time to get up and go, girl, if I've been sitting there too long.
Yeah, great example. So the motivation, the accountability, the outcomes that you're seeing there on the screen.
I've always gotten really bored with exercise, so I didn't tend to do it. But what really helps me is I do the new step at Fitness Center, and those TVs have just been wonderful because I don't have to think about exercise. I can listen to the television.
I think we've all been guilty of that over the years, right? Exercise may be boring us out or not being as incentivizing as maybe it was. So even if it means zoning out for a half hour there and being entertained with something else, as long as you're getting the workout in, right? Did we have somebody over here that wanted to share something about technology, Rosemary?
I have Strava on my phone, and it talks to me. It tells me the distance. I use it when I'm walking. It tells me the distance. It tells me how fast I'm walking or how slowly, so that I can speed it up if I want and that kind of thing.
So Strava, S-T-R-A-V-A, and there's others like this out there. It's almost a fitness community. That's how you could think about it, right, Rosemary? And I think things like that, and that's a great segue. It's like we planned this. That is something that we're working on at LCS. We're trying to identify partners that can leverage a very unique aspect of what I think happens within our senior living communities, and that's competition, right? Aren't you all competitive to some degree? Yeah, if you guys, I see, yeah, oh yeah, see, and again, even in my time at the community and as I'm out there talking to other communities, that's always been a very key, unique aspect of the resident dynamic there is a competitive aspect. And not only with each other, but with other communities as well, right? You want to be the best of the best. And so I think the concept of a fitness community that lets you know how you're doing, almost like a dashboard of sorts, where you can see how you're stacking up as a group, ranking against others. And again, not in a negatively competitive way, but in a motivating, encouraging type of way where you could, do some of these things. So we're looking into that. So a little bit more to come. We're having some great conversations with some of the leaders in the fitness equipment space, in the wearable space, and in kind of that back end kind of dashboard space to help us accomplish that. Next is emotional. And again, I want to direct your attention to the verb, the action item that you all chose, your team chose to kind of connect the dots with that one, and that's feel, right? Again, you see the really lengthy, and you can read that, sort of description of what it means to be emotionally well. And that's valuable, digest that, read that. But I'd love the simplicity of just feel. And I put this one second because I almost feel like, as far as tangibility goes, it's on the opposite end of physical, right? Whereas physical is very concrete. You can directly point to what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, the FIT principles that we talked about. But emotional wellness is a little bit different, isn't it? It's more of a vicarious end product of doing something, right? Let's take some of those group fitness classes that you talked about earlier, or let's even take those individual exercise examples that you all gave. Who feels great at the end of a good workout? Absolutely, right? And maybe that was the reason that you chose to do that. Maybe it was for physical goals. I want to, maintain my weight. I want to be able to move better. I want to be able to, play with my grandkids. But maybe you also do it, right? Because you know that it's going to make you feel good afterwards, right? So again, it ends up being, I sort of use the term, at the bottom there, you see crossover wellness benefit, where it ends up being one of the things that you just get out of participating in events, programs, or activities that maybe are intended towards other things in particular, but you know that if you do it, just like with the exercise example, you're going to feel good afterwards. So it ends up being important. And again, quite the wealth of opportunities that you have here. Do you all recognize those ladies on the right there? Yeah, so that was from your casino event, your casino night that you had here, where you raised some funds for the Alzheimer's Association. And again, the purpose of that, I'm sure they had fun, but would you say that it made them feel good, that they were contributing to something as a part of hosting that and doing that? Absolutely, right? No doubt that it made them feel good. So again, while there maybe aren't programs, and maybe there are, I think about support groups as an example, by and large, it's going to be the relationships that you have with yourselves, with the staff members that are here, groups, arts and crafts, clubs and committees, and like I said at the bottom, kind of that crossover wellness benefit as well. Next, we think about environmental. This is an interesting one. When as you consider environmental wellness, and again, that might not be the most obvious one. You maybe don't get up in the morning and say, "How am I going to enhance my environmental wellness today?" That's probably not at the top of the priority list, but it is something that's important because again, engagement with programs or activities that cross into environmental wellness tend to be beneficial. And you might think of this in a couple of ways. And again, we were talking about the weather earlier. Lucky you, you can be outdoors probably most every day of the year. So it is absolutely the ability to be outside, depending on the time of day, right? So it is absolutely being outdoors and doing activities outside. So it is that. There's also an earth conservation component to that, right? As far as doing things like recycling and whatnot. So that's absolutely an aspect of that. I would also throw safety in there as well, as far as environmental wellness, the sort of the area around you, making sure that that safety is being kept in mind. We talked about balance and falls earlier, so that becomes important. And then again, I'll bring it back to the action word that was chosen for this, which is what? Respect. Yeah, I like that. Again, that's a simple, easy way to think about. I'm going to respect my outdoor environment. I'm going to respect kind of how I'm contributing to, any sort of carbon footprint as an example. So that becomes really important. And so when I think about, again, the great things that you all have available here are just a few that come to mind. So again, that the outdoor recreational programming that you have in place, and whether it's your dog park or your bocce ball courts, or just the trails and the paths that you have out there as you're able to take your walks, that becomes really important. Gardening opportunities, right? Again, being one with nature, that absolutely can enhance your sense of well-being and help you to live your best life. And as we talked about the earth conservation side of things, who's familiar with the Paper Boys and Girls here? They do a great job, don't they? Yeah. Again, that's part of that earth conservation. That's part of that respect for our environment that you guys are preaching. Who else would like to share? Any other things that come to mind when you think about either your environmental wellness or what you're seeing out there in the community?
I was thinking about motivation, particularly as you think of the early Weight Watcher programs. Unless you're motivated to do it, you're not going anywhere.
Okay. So maybe her environment causes her to be motivated. That's a good one. Anybody else? Okay.
Bird watching once a month and the environment that we have that attracts 103 birds.
Types of birds? Wow. That's impressive. Who else knew that you had 103 types of birds? That's incredible. So that's environmental wellness along a couple of lines, isn't it? That's a great example. Dee?
And you say gardening up there, but I wonder if everybody realized that our community garden is coming right along, and we'll have an opportunity to grow and eat and share with what we grow.
That's amazing. That's a great example. I want to see pictures of that when it's up and ready to go, because again, that's almost like sustainability, right? That's your farm to table or community garden to table sort of concept that is absolutely environmental wellness. Educational? Yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay, spiritual. So spiritual is also an interesting one, kind of in the middle as far as tangibility goes, right? Because we talked about something like physical, where it's so concrete, you know exactly kind of what you're getting into, and then emotional being a bit more, again, on the vicarious side. I feel like spiritual is somewhere in the middle, because absolutely, tangibly, what might come to mind are maybe things like faith-based activities, right? Things that are, religious in some way, shape, or form. So you might think of it that way, and that's absolutely fair. I would include that, and that's very important to a lot of people as far as being well, and as we've been saying all morning, living your best life. But it's not limited to that, is it, right? People achieve spirituality in a variety of ways, don't they? And for a lot of people, it's just the idea of mind-body connectivity, isn't it? And you might accomplish that very similar to emotional wellness in a variety of different ways. So because of the intangibility, here's where I love the verb again, you just have to trust, right? That it's there. So that becomes really important as well. And so I think Walt brought up earlier Tai Chi, right? So Walt brought that up from a balance when we were talking about the physical side of things, but a lot of people accomplish and achieve spirituality through some of these mind-body, like group fitness classes. So whether it's yoga, Tai Chi, I see you guys offer Qigong, right? Raise your hand if you guys do any of those, yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. Okay. A pretty good amount, about a fourth of the room here. And again, we talk about that connectivity with nature. a big reason of why environmental wellness ends up being impactful is because of the spiritual aspect that you get out of that as well. And again, just some of your outdoor spaces in general. So let's talk a little bit more about spirituality. Hands up, who wants to share a little bit about how they achieve spirituality, whether it's, again, faith-based or more of the mind-body side of things? Shirley?
Hi, we also have a labyrinth that is just about a year old now. And in the summer, it's hard to walk it. But now is the time that we can begin walking it. So it's a good way to achieve spiritual wellness.
It's a great example. Your labyrinth that you have here, not many communities have the opportunity to have that, so certainly something that you want to take advantage of. One more. Let's get one more share on spirituality, spiritual wellness, and how you accomplish that. Okay.
In addition to the people who have their own cars, it's in terms of getting to church services and that kind of thing, the village provides bus service too, which is wonderful.
That's great. So again, it's access, right? Being able to provide access to some of these opportunities. Somebody had their hand up over here. Okay.
Mine's a completely different look at it, but I love that they use the word trust, because the first thing we were impressed with Friendship Village was the people being all over and everybody being so friendly and seeming to know each other. And we visited 5 other communities in Scottsdale, and we never saw anybody out and around. They must have been all in their rooms. And that says to me there's not a lot of trust there.
That's a really insightful example for sure. Okay, Matt?
In order to have a spirit of trust, there has to be safety, and I believe that the environment here is extremely safe, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally.
That's so well said, and it goes into, and I haven't spoken as much as I probably should on this, but as we think about some of these dimensions of wellness, think about how they cross over and how they complement and impact one another, because rarely, if ever, is it just one thing that you're accomplishing or getting out of it, right? It ends up being several, so that's a great example.
There are various activities that one can do from the social work, and some of them can be related to memory loss or taking care of someone else or for grief. All of these could be part of the spiritual too.
Great examples. It's a great segue into vocational. Probably the one that I feel like living in a senior community such as Friendship Village Tempe, it just lends itself so great to maintaining a sense of purpose, which was said earlier. When you said that, Rich, that's the first thing that came to mind was he's talking all about vocational wellness, right? Even though you're retired, and some of you maybe are still working in some way that's not uncommon to see, it doesn't mean that you are no longer relevant, right? Retirement does not equal lack of relevance, right? You're contributing so much, and whether it's to the Friendship Village Tempe community, and for many of you, who volunteers outside of here, who remains active, so you're contributing to the greater community as well. So that's got to be, aside from getting in a workout or doing something outside, that's got to be one of the main things that makes you feel good, makes you feel relevant, and like you're maintaining that sense of purpose. So vocational wellness is no doubt one of the most important ones as far as what it means to, again, live your best life. And I love the verb. Once again, what's the verb up there? Do. It's almost like Nike was onto something when they said just do it, right? It's almost like they knew what they were talking about. So yeah, just do. And again, I could probably spend an hour or 7 talking to you guys about the vocational wellness opportunities within and outside of the community. And you know, let's the clubs, groups, committees, these are the types of things that are just so core to a senior living community like yours. And I guarantee you that if there isn't a club, group, or committee that is already out there, you can probably start one, can't you? And many of you probably have, right? Double-edged sword, right? Once you're in, you can't get out, right? For some of you that lead some of these groups, I know how that goes. So again, those become just so important to sustain your passions. Because don't you see that a lot with the clubs, groups, and committees? Isn't it oftentimes because somebody had a prior hobby, profession, just an area of interest that they just didn't want to let go, so they brought the passion here, right? And then they share it with others and bring them in. And so again, that's what creates such an amazing spirit of community, and again, what allows you all to live that best life. Again, so all of the volunteer opportunities, the list can go on. You have your gift shop, you have your wood shop, which I know recently you continue to grow and expand that, don't you? You continue to add things to the wood shop. It's one of those things that takes a life of its own, and it ends up being pretty incredible. So you're doing a great job there. Mentorship opportunities, that's where we get into like the intergenerational side of things as well, and working with younger folks. And again, the last bullet point there, but certainly not least, even why we're here today, because of the great, amazing work that the foundation is doing. So again, everything that group is up to as well. So let's take a couple of quick examples here with vocational, because again, that one is so integral. Who wants to share one or two things that they're doing as far as accomplishing and achieving vocational wellness?
We have a Kiwanis Club here, and we make use of quilts that are made by the quilters and toys that are made by the wood shop, and we contribute those to the hospital. And the club does a lot of things in the community as well.
That's a great example, Doris. And what it made me think about, and I have to imagine this happens here. In fact, I know that it happens here. Think about how you contribute to some of the higher levels of care at the community, right? You think about some of the things that maybe independent living residents do for your AL memory care folks, for your long-term care neighbors that you have as well. Is that a fair assessment, that there's quite a bit that goes on there? So again, that's tremendous, and that is absolutely an example of vocational wellness and well-being. All right, the social side, the fun side, right? You know, I talked earlier about research validating the fact that seniors participating in this holistic approach are the ones that age the most successfully, right? You remember me saying that. The one dimension that was the most significant contributor to that sense of aging successfully was socialization, was social wellness. So maybe you thought it was physical, maybe you thought it was intellectual, which we'll get into in just a second, but believe it or not, it is social wellness. So you might have some physical limitations, you might have some cognitive limitations, you might not volunteer a whole lot, you might not be outside, but if you are having fun with what you choose to do, you're gonna be just fine. And that's why I love the title of this, Tom, because it's living your best life, right? It's what it means to you. And again, that's what's so great about an environment like this. You can be as involved as you want to be, right? You can lead groups, clubs, and committees. You can be a participant. So again, it's all sort of up to you. And I feel like the social aspect, and you think about the verb here, to bond, it really lends itself to what's going on. And again, think about the activity calendar that I showed you earlier. Probably more than half of those activities that are on there in some way impact social health, right? Social well-being. Probably most of those, if not all of those, actually impact social wellness. So again, the list can go on and on with what you have available here. But really, it's the general interaction and engagement that you have with each other as friends, as neighbors. It's all of the group programs that take place. Let's go back to the fitness example, right? How many of you do group fitness classes here? Raise your hand, okay? Keep your hand up if you have fun in those, and if you feel like you socializing, engaging with your neighbors, friends, the instructor, whoever, is a part of that too, okay? And we talked a lot about you can put your hand down, I don't want sore shoulders. we talked earlier about motivation and accountability. A lot of you maybe show up to those classes even less because of the physical side, right? And more because you want to spend some time with your friends and neighbors. So again, it becomes a really important aspect of what you guys do. Not to mention the social spaces. So again, think about your bistro, cafe area, just some of these common areas where, yeah, technically you're there to have some breakfast and have some food, but isn't it more about the socialization and the conversation and the interaction that happens at some of these 2-hour meals? Yeah, yeah. You know, it's interesting when I talk a lot with our sales and marketing teams, actually. I work closely with them, and so it's almost like beating a dead horse a little bit, but I tell them when you're on a tour and you're showing somebody like your dining venues, don't just focus on the menu. Don't just focus on the aesthetics. While that's important, talk about and connect the dots with the fact that that's going to be a part of their social interaction and well-being, because they're going to meet so many new people. They're going to make great friends, lifelong neighbors, etc. So it becomes incredibly important. What are some of the more fun things? Let's take a couple of quick examples here. Some of the more fun things that you guys have done over the years that you really sort of cherish and look forward to, Lynn?
I was familiar with the village before the expansion several years ago because my mother lived here. And I will tell you the difference once the cafe and the bars emerged, the social, the constant social, particularly in the cafe, the ability to sit down at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and find people to talk to. The cafe, I think, has made an appreciable difference in the sociability at the village.
Well, and kudos to those who are kind of forward thinking that way, right? To know if we're going to add a new space, if we're going to change up the physical structure or look and feel of the community, let's make sure that it lends itself to, again, some of these areas of wellness. Who else would like to share? Right?
Well, one of the things that I enjoy the most that they have also involves physical fitness, because it's the hiking club. And we have volunteers here in the village who plan the hikes and go out and check the hikes out ahead of time. And it's really wonderful that they provide all that. And we have buses to take us, so.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. It's almost like finding your niche a little bit, right? It's almost thinking about, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I care about, I'm going to involve myself with that, and therefore get that social benefit. Dixie?
I have to give credit to dining services. When I moved here, I knew one person that lived at the village, and I was always introduced at a table, and that question about, may I join you, was not mine to do. The dining staff are stepping up and saying, may Dixie join you? And they break that barrier and they seat you with everyone, so you're automatically included into a table.
That's so important. You know, again, I talked earlier about kind of how I work with sales and marketing, and having been at the community level, and I'm sure you all would agree here that if I were to ask you what makes Friendship Village Tempe special, unique, and such a great community, would you all say it's the people? 1,000%, wouldn't you? And it's amazing how that evolves. I talked a little bit about my experience at Monarch Landing. I had the privilege of, that was a startup when I began there. So we were in our trailers and whatnot. Eventually it opened. And so I got to see that firsthand, and it's incredible. It's amazing the social sort of ecosystem that evolves, and how a community takes its shape and form. And certainly a community like yours, as tenured as it is, again, you're reaping those benefits of having been successful with that. Intellectual wellness. Probably a 1A, if not a 2, when I think about tangibility. You hear me say that a lot, right? Like with physical, right? Very tangible. You know exactly what that is. It translates to something like exercise. I feel like intellectual wellness, cognitive health, that's up there as well. And I feel like it's a pretty big priority, isn't it? Right? Would you all agree, keeping a sound mind, it's probably just as, if not more important to you than keeping a fit body, right? It's a very high priority. And so this becomes, again, one of the more important things that you can engage with, and very similar to physical fitness. And we talked about FIT principles earlier. Brain health, it's going to have its own components as well. So it's not all brain fitness is the same. Imagine if for exercise, all you did was walk and you never did strength training, or all you did was Tai Chi and you never swam or did cardiovascular exercise. You want a well-rounded fitness program, don't you? So the same applies for your brain health. So you have these components of brain fitness as well that are important. I was in the library earlier, and her name escapes me, but your pseudo-librarian, she was telling me, she was sort of joking about how important her job is to get the crossword puzzles out there in the morning. Yeah, see, you all laugh because you know it's true. She's like, if they're not out there. So she jokingly talked about that, and she made about 40 copies. And so we were laughing about the routine. You know, you're all sticklers for your crossword puzzle. Got to have the crossword puzzle. And while that's important, it's probably only addressing a couple of these areas, right? So that's great. Kudos to you. Keep up the crossword puzzles, but let's diversify that a little bit more, right? Let's do some other things that are going to engage you cognitively. And again, I'll talk about the crossover benefit, right? Chances are, when you're in that exercise class, you're actually working out your mind as well. Chances are, when you're engaging with others, sustaining conversation, that's helping you keep a sharp mind, right? So there's all of these different ways that you're able to do that. Let's take a brain break right here. Got a little brain teaser for you all. So I want you guys to check out what's on the screen here. Okay, and the question is, based on the pattern that you're seeing up there, so you have a specific pattern going on with those first 3 triangles as far as the response being in the center. So take a minute and see if you can learn what that pattern is and then apply it to the 4th triangle and see if you can't come up with that answer. Don't shout it out. We talked earlier about being competitive. Okay, who thinks they know the answer? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Okay, go ahead, Elaine. So Elaine thinks the answer is 8. Okay. 4, we think the answer is 4. Any other guesses? Okay, let's work through it together. Let's start with the first triangle. Start with the top number. Let's subtract the bottom left number. So 6 minus 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. That's how we got our center number, right? Let's apply it to the second one. 7 minus 5 is? Times 3 is? Now you got the pattern, right? 7 minus 4 is 3, times 2 is 6. So now let's apply it to the last one. What do we get? And there you go. Yeah. And here's the great news. Whether you got it right or wrong, the fact that you were working through it was exercising a very specific part of your brain that's going to help you maintain that sharpness, right? So again, keep up the crossword puzzles, but I know that you have a ton of brain fitness, intellectual wellness opportunities that are available, again, right at your fingertips. And whether it's lifelong learning opportunities, specific brain fitness programs, technology. So we talked earlier about technology being a vehicle to accomplish physical wellness. I would also put it up there as a great vehicle to accomplish intellectual wellness. I asked you earlier, do you have a smartphone, tablet, iPad, things of that nature? Even just learning how to use one of those things is intellectual wellness, isn't it, right? Knowing how to figure it out and whatnot. So again, great opportunity to be able to engage there. And now the last one is health services. So this one is a little bit unique, and I think it applies specifically to senior living because of the inevitable sort of healthcare components that you have. And again, care, you see is sort of the verb there. And And whether it's your higher levels of care, and I think we joked about earlier is, you know, it's nice to have those there, but if we could hold off on those as long as possible, we want to be able to do that. But again, your access to the higher levels of care is important. And even in your IL settings, the fact that you have services like outpatient rehab, home health services, and a team of people, this goes back to the staff a little bit, that are here to help navigate those challenges, those setbacks that inevitably we all have, right? So it's nice to have that safety net and that team of people that's there to help you from this health services standpoint as well. So that becomes another one that's pretty important. So I know we're at our time here, so I want to thank you all for allowing me to come today with you all and share a little bit about, again, from our standpoint and from what your community is already doing in terms of not only what it means to live your best life, but how you can go about and accomplishing that. So thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Before I want to wind up the seminar here, I'd like to thank Lynn Busenbark and Walt Blackmore for the wonderful new banner that they made for us here for the foundation. And it's the first time we used it today. I'd like right after the meeting, Tony would like to get a picture with the foundation board members. I'd like them to come quickly to the front so we can take that picture. And then right after that, if your question hasn't been answered, Tony has to get back to 2 small children in Chicago tonight, but he will stay for 20 minutes before he has to leave for his airplane and answer any questions that you have. Thank you all for coming. Tony, where do you want to take the picture? Do you want to take it in there? Okay. All right, good.